All right, my name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Jared Coon. It's July 10th, 2025, and we're at Résonance in Carleton. Jared, thank you so much for joining us today. First question, why wine?
Honestly, it was kind of a fluke. I got into chemical engineering at WSU. Started on that pathway for a couple years. Barely passed OChem 1. They told me they told everyone if you didn't get a B or better in OChem 1, you probably wouldn't pass OChem 2. And all the engineering classes just weren't really kind of clicking with me. Everyone was talking about working for BP, and I was just like, that's not where I want to be. So I was kind of I was looking for any other pathway, and happened to have watched a movie called A Good Year with Russell Crowe, where he inherits a vineyard from his uncle, and was looking through the school directory for other majors and saw that we had a wine program at WSU. So went and talked to the counselor for it, and it was this Apple researcher, old hippie guy with like a bong on his shelf, and told me all about it. And I was like, all right, well, I'll just jump in with 2 feet and see what happens. I figured nothing else, I'd probably end up growing weed or something like that. But yeah, jumped in. I rented from the school's library, Hugh Johnson's An Atlas of Wine. Growing up, we always had like National Geographics in the house, and history books and things like that. So I read that cover to cover and just thought like the history of wine, the chemistry related aspects of it, all of that was like, seemed really interesting to me. So yeah, just kind of dove in. Wasn't really a wine drinker at all. Like my parents, they would have like a Sutter home sitting in the fridge for months on end kind of thing. So my dad is still like, he'll only really drink a Gewürztraminer and just a taste, but wine's still not a big part of their like family life, our family life in that regard. So yeah, kind of a real fluke. Like once I got into that, I had a roommate and who was interested in beer making. So I was like, sure, interested, let's try that out. Dove into that and kind of with school making some wine through a professor, because our school wasn't bonded, so we actually couldn't physically make wine and take it off the premises. So to facilitate our least experience, he would buy grapes from a local vineyard, and we would go to his house, and he had all the equipment in his garage, and we would just do like mini crush days in the fall for a couple years. And then my first vintage, happened to be also a WSU graduate that had a winery in Pullman, Mary Sellers, and so I just talked to him, stopped going to school for like 3 weeks and worked harvest, making Sangio, Carmenere, Cabernet Sauvignon, Viognier, Semillon, stuff like that. Stuff that I don't touch anymore at all. Now working for Résonance, but yeah, great first experience. And yeah, I just always love from that point, just the diversity of jobs you can have in a given day and harvest, or even during the year, and have always been kind of like mechanically apt in like trying to solve problems and stuff like that, and that's a huge part of winemaking. So yeah, just kind of went from there. And then probably actually my first wine that like I was like, okay, I get this, was like when I had like a Syrah in New Zealand in 2010 or something. So that would have been like 2 years into the wine program already. So it was very much a kind of a back end thing that I was more interested in, just like going through the theory and everything before it was actually like a passion about the actual product at the end. So yeah.
Love that. Let's back up for a second, talk about life before wine a little bit. Tell us where you're born and raised and kind of path before college.
Yeah, I grew up in Spokane, Washington. Cool little neighborhood called Garland. We had like a local cinema, and so like my sister and I would just ride bikes during the summer and go to libraries, and then the movies for $1 and the ice cream shop kind of thing. And my parents have a lake cabin up on Priest Lake, so if we weren't in town, we were up there summer and winter, falls and everything, on the water or skiing or snowmobiling in the mountains. So a lot of also home repair. My dad has built our house and remodeled both of them. So a lot of like, sheetrock walls, unfinished things that we always kind of helped finish up, and a lot of digging, a lot of yard work.
Why did you choose to go to school and pursue mechanical engineering?
I took chemistry junior year of high school, and just like, I don't know, it clicked for me. So I never really was much for biology at that point. I just liked the simplicity and directness of like chemistry. And my dad, he's an architect and worked for the county, so he always saw like engineers and worked with them. And he's like, engineering, like if you do something, like I think you'd be really good for engineering. So chemical engineer. So I was like, sweet, that it should work out. But yeah, just, the reality of chemical engineering is just a lot of like high calculus, a gas or a liquid flowing through a pipe at pressures and heats. And that's not what I expected I'd be doing. So yeah, just kind of, that's where I decided to pivot. But yeah, it was kind of, I was into sophomore year. It was like, thought about going to like a Shaolin monastery and learning Kung Fu, or joining the Air Force, or finding another degree at school. And since at the moment, like my parents were helping with school, I was like, all right, maybe this would probably be at least a good thing to stay in and, have them like help me out with that. So yeah.
You can always do Kung Fu later.
Yeah, right. I took a few years when I was living in New Zealand. So, but yeah, at least got to try it out. Not in China, but someplace. Yeah.
So before we get to the sort of the physical work of wine, tell me about the classes at Washington State and what sort of clicked for you about wine education.
It was actually probably like the biochemistry class. Like we had a professor, and he would come in sometimes and he's like, I ate a banana this morning, and then he would just go through all the biomechanical pathways of how it like went into your body through the Krebs cycle and all like the different aspects of like the biochemistry, and you're just like, all right, that's some pretty cool shit to like, that's, within every living organism. And then I know a lot of the winemaking was definitely more theoretical, being in Pullman. Like WSU has a Prosser campus where they do have like a student winery, but again, I don't know if you've ever been to Central Washington. It's not the most stunning place to live. I had grandparents that lived there and went there every Easter, and I was like, yeah, I don't ever want to end up here. So I was like, I'd rather learn theoretics than see, dust everywhere. So I stayed with Pullman and just learned the theoreticals, and figured, yeah, I'd probably, and again, at that point, like, there wasn't like, I wasn't really interested in Burgundy or Bordeaux blinds, or there was no focus in terms of the greater wine that I tried. I think probably with most people, I started with like sweeter white wines like Rieslings as like very approachable things to drink, and then kind of evolved from that.
So let's talk about your kind of first approaches in fermentation. You mentioned obviously working first crush, but also making beer on the side. So let's talk about interest in fermentation and how it started, how it grew.
Yeah, my roommate and I, we started making beer. We made like a rye beer, but it was like, what do you call that? I don't even do it anymore. Like the malt. I can't even remember. Pretty much all I do is all grain now. So it's like the simpler version where you just have like the powder and then you add like a little bit. And that seemed more of a mess than doing like the physical all grain. So we kind of dove in both feet. There was a place called Tri-State over in Idaho, where Idaho State was. So we'd drive across the border and buy all the grains and all the equipment from there. And like we built a lot of our own equipment so that we could like do the all grain stuff. So like one beer I've made a lot is a pumpkin ale. Because, growing up, that was always like Thanksgiving, and my sister and I were always like enjoyed Halloween and the fall and everything like that. So yeah, and like my sister drew us like labels for the beers that we made when we were in college. So we had fun with it. Yeah, so it was more of that, and then kind of listening to podcasts about home brewing and just kind of absorbing as much as you could. So that was definitely more of kind of like the application of what I was learning in school at the time. Because again, like beer you can make anytime. Grapes you only have once a year really to make it. And I never really was interested in buying like a winemaking kit with juice or whatever they come with. So yeah.
So tell me about your first harvest experience.
So it was cold as hell. I don't know if you've ever been in the fall in Pullman, but there's definitely days that it was like 30, like there was frost on all the equipment. So always had a giant bucket of hot water to like thaw your hands out in and like, but yeah, it was very hands-on. He had maybe, quarter-ton basket press, and he fermented in like quarter-ton or half-ton picking bins. So like pinch downs, super easy because there's just kind of just a little bit of a stir, but then we would bucket everything into the basket press. So like, and I thought, I don't know, working with those grapes, a lot more tannins. So like after my first harvest, my hands were just black, and I thought that was pretty cool. So I had like black hands for, I don't know, about a week. And I was just like, all right, yeah, this is fun. Like the effort put in and the results and everything like that. So, yeah.
After having studied the theory, how did the real thing compare?
I don't know. I think that was kind of like a quick glimpse. So that was, when did I do that? That was 2011. So actually the previous year, I guess I had probably my first more experience was I did a semester abroad in New Zealand and went to Lincoln University. And they have a way more like hands. Actually, funny enough, I saw that you guys interviewed Peter Eber the other day, and I was in the same class with him in New Zealand. Yeah, it's a small world. So yeah, I know Peter was there for like the whole graduate degree, and I was just there for a semester. But yeah. So with that, like they have their own vineyard on site and their own winery on site. So it was definitely more of a grape to bottle experience. Like we got to do a trial, but it was also to create like a drinkable finished product, where at WSU it was a lot more theoretical. Like the wine that we got to make, our professor, he was the bacteria fairy. So you might got like Zygosaccharomyces, or like you'd put Brett in your fermenter. And then the whole goal was for you to identify the fault, or through the chemistries, figure out if you had been infected or not. So like what I made at WSU, I'm kind of bouncing around a lot, but what I made at WSU was we did temperatures for Chardonnay, and then we also did punch downs for Cabernet. So we did like 0 punch downs, 1, and then like 2. The 1 was just tires, is all it smelled like and tasted like. So it was definitely not a drinkable thing. And the Chardonnays actually didn't make it because I went to the Great American Beer Festival with my friend who I was making beer with. So my partner was the one that like crushed it and everything, and I was like at 50 parts and then like crushed it, and he added nothing, so it was pretty oxidized all the way through. So again, but yeah, anyways, back to Lincoln. So we got to make Sauvignon Blanc. It was very much like, ferment it, clarify it. We did heat stability, cold stability trials, all the chemistry you would normally do as a winemaker, and then filter it and bottle it and things like that. So we actually got to have like a case of finished wine at the end of the whole project semester. And then the second semester, which before that I left for, they did the whole like labeling and marketing kind of project as like the second semester of that. So, which I really enjoyed Lincoln. It was it's kind of like Linfield, it's just this cool little campus just outside of Christchurch. And yeah, just kind of like being at a summer camp a little bit because of the little cafeteria and everything like that. Like, I mean, WSU's 25,000 people, and you go to Lincoln, and I think it was 4. And I know Linfield's like 1,400 or something like that. So it's quaint.
It's a good word for it, quaint. I like that. So coming off of that experience and coming off of your sort of during school harvest experience, as you were approaching graduation, tell me what you were thinking about. What you wanted to do after graduation?
I had no plans. Yeah, my sister had moved to Portland, 2007, somewhere in there. So I knew there was wine in Oregon, and yeah, just kind of came down to visit. I actually, I don't know, it'd been interesting if my path would have been different, but like I came down to taste and kind of like suss out a job. And it happened to be one of those days where it was just like torrential rains, like felt like you were in a hurricane basically. And we were gonna go tasting at Bergstrom, but the power was out. So they had closed. And so the lady's like, I can't like do anything. So sorry, I can't like do a tasting. And I know, looking back, I'd been curious, like if I had tasted there, would have been like, whoa, okay, like I need to work here. And then, my path would have been totally different. Didn't happen. So I ended up finding a job at 12th and Maple. And that was, for me, I guess that was, my introduction to Oregon and Oregon wine, and probably like what set me on a path. Because again, like Washington, Cabernet, Syrahs, things like that, no one really talks about clones. It's more of just like, we take fruit from that vineyard, and there's not, I don't get the feeling of specificity and so much of terroir. There's the AVAs, but it's a growing region rather than like the uniqueness of all the aspects that I think Oregon really like embodies. So yeah, just like, processing Pinots that people are, like, oh, we got to keep the 777 separate from the Wadensville and things like that. And you're just like, what are they talking about? Like, okay, like that's interesting. And then you're like tasting the berries. You see the berries, they're different sizes. They come off the clusters differently. They ferment differently, all the aspects like that. So yeah, just kind of like, okay. And, I think also working at a larger facility like that, you really got to meet more people in the wine community, which I think maybe if I had found a job where it was like me and one winemaker who was, and that was it kind of thing, I don't know if I would have embraced or been involved so much in like meeting people, going to Lumpies, hanging out Lumpies kind of thing on my first harvest, and meeting other interns and all those kind of aspects that make, harvest a really fun experience when you come to Oregon. So and then after 12th and Maple, talking to people, I was like, okay, and kind of now what? And one lady I worked with, I'd already kind of done the vintage hopping. She's like, well, you can hang around and try to find like work bottling or whatever. Or some people, go down to Australia, New Zealand. So I was like, okay, let's try that. So I got a working holiday visa for Australia. I got a job at Curie Hill in Clare Valley, and flew down in January and bought myself a bike because I thought the winery was just in town, and it turned out it was like 7 miles outside of town. So my first day of work, I rode my bike down to the tasting room and found out it was a tasting room, not a winery. And I was like, okay. So luckily, big enough town, and then again, larger facility. Like 12th and Maple, we did, I think, 2,400 tons, and Curie Hill, we did like 7,000 tons. So again, just I think as well, working at larger facilities, you get to see the flow and the efficiencies of wineries, of what is possible, and like, what you can build to make it to process 7,000 tons in the same amount of time that somebody else might process 50 tons. It was crew. We did 24 hours there. So I was one of the night shift lab techs, and basically I would work for 2 hours in the lab to finish up the day shift, and then we didn't have anything to do until 4 a.m. when we did ferment rounds. So I did that for about 2 days, and then I was like, I'm gonna go out to the cellar because I'm not gonna just hang out in a lab through the middle of the night for no reason. So I just started going out to the cellar and being like, what do you want me to do? What hoses can I drag around? Is there an acid add or something like that to do? And just started jumping into that. And also, if you're gonna work in Australia, I think night shift's where it at, because it was 7 degrees like every night. There's no bugs. Whereas in the day it was like 90, and you got wasps and all kinds of stuff. So I really enjoyed it. And then harvest was about, 2 weeks. After that, I went to the Great Barrier Reef and did scuba diving and got certified. And then, came home and worked in a restaurant for the rest of the summer back in Spokane. And then, started as a washing dishes, and then became the prep chef for like the last 2 months. So yeah, which is great. And I'll show up in the morning, make pizza dough and pasta sauces and beurre blanc sauces and things like that, and really enjoyed that. So definitely has leveled up my cooking ability from having that experience.
Can imagine. So at that point, you had seen 2 very large-scale winemaking operations, and you'd gotten your feet wet. You kind of got an idea of sort of winemaking at that scale. Did you had that changed sort of your outlook? Had you decided what you wanted to do? Or
Not yet.
Before yet?
No. So when I was in Australia, I was still kind of like pretty open book. So my what I chose to do next was apply to the top 10 wines of that year on Wine Spectator, and one of them happened to be Costa Brown, and got a call back and got a job as a cellar hand at Costa Brown for 2013. So after working at the restaurant, I packed up my Dodge Spirit with my bike and everything, and I drove down to California and found a place to live in Santa Rosa and rode my bike over to Sebastopol every morning. And yeah, showed up, had breakfast, and then got on with the day.
Tell me about the experience there.
Really interesting. They had just moved into the Barlow, which is like a brand new complex. And they were basically in like a giant warehouse before. So this was a purpose-built Chardonnay and Pinot Noir facility. So I think that was what really kind of clicked for me, of like, these are people that have been making like amazing wines that people are loving, and they have taken that, and this is the layout, and this is like what they see is like the optimal efficiency and like practicality for producing this grape, these 2 grapes really. And yeah, so that kind of really solidified, I think, then Pinot Noir and Chardonnay for me. Yeah, it was great. Again, a very large team. They actually, another small world, Chase Renton of L'Angelo, he worked harvest with me. And Bethany Kimmel, who does Color Collector out in the Gorge as well, worked harvest with me that year. So yeah, it's great to see like people that you've worked with, like how their careers have progressed and where they've kind of ended up and found their home or created their own home kind of thing.
What was different, or what did you learn there that you didn't already know?
A lot of more of the details for making Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Like, again, the 2 previous jobs as well were lab positions. And so I'd never been fully in the cellar. And so Costa Brown was my first, like that was kind of like as well. It was like, you know, when you're running pH and TAs by titration for like 8 hours a day and you blow your titration and you're just kind of like, it was this, or you kind of make a guesstimation. I was kind of like, okay, like I'm probably going to burn myself out in the lab if like this is how I feel only on my second harvest doing this. So I was like, and I, again, enjoyed more of the cellar work. So I was like, that's where I'd like to go and see how I do in that environment. So that was kind of my first transition of that. And yeah, again, kind of, again, back to the details, like, you know, after fermentation, like near filling to make sure like you minimize oxidation, using bulldogs as well. You know, down there they stacked barrels 6 high and you get to climb them to the top to top them up and everything like that. So I know, just fun to kind of climb around and be a bit of a kid in a cellar. So yeah. And then as well, like they're big about just, you know, it's a very relaxed environment. So they had great sound system and just made harvest kind of a fun experience.
What came next?
From there, I had like leaving Australia, a few of the people I worked with, they were on the same, from the States and working holiday visas. And they actually moved to Melbourne and got, you know, jobs in like a wine shop or something like that. And given that I had only a year and I found out kind of like in the process of everything that to come back to Australia would be really difficult. So I got a working holiday visa for New Zealand, and I wanted to maximize it because that would be, again, probably the one time that I would get to go down there. So I got that and just kind of cold called, emailed people being like, hey, like I'm looking for a harvest position. I'm also interested in vineyard work. Like, what do you got? A guy got back to me at Terra Sancta in Central Otago and said, yeah, come down. We can do some vineyard work. And he's like, I know the winery already has somebody, so it'll just be like the summer months. And at the same time, I had talked to the assistant winemaker at Pax, which was across the street from Costa Brown. And I was asking her about New Zealand because she had already been. And she's like Blenheim's cool and all, but it's just Sauvignon Blanc, really. So if you're looking for a more, I know, not authentic, but different experience, Otago, of course, but look to Nelson because there's a lot of more aromatic whites and just more varieties are being produced out of there than any place else. So I took her advice and applied to every winery in that region. And a place called Waimea Estates got back to me, and yeah, got a job there for would that be 2014 harvest. So flew down, would be December 31st, skipped January 1st because of the time zone and landed January 2nd in New Zealand. Bought a car off the cutest Malaysian couple and drove down to Central Otago, where ironically the guy I made wine with at Lincoln, 4 years prior, was living. So rented a room from him and drove to from Clyde to Cromwell and worked in the vineyards at Terra Sancta for 3 months. Just leaf plucking, lifting wires, doing some irrigation work, whatever they wanted help with. And then it turned out that their intern fell through, so they offered me the position for the internship, but I felt that I had already committed to working in Nelson. And so I declined and said, I would feel bad to drop out this close to harvest for another winery. So drove up to, took my time and drove up to Nelson and worked harvest at Waimea. Bigger facility, back to 2,000 tons. But the interesting factor for me was they produced 11 different varieties. So they had majority Sauvignon Blanc, but Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Albarino, Viognier, Sauvignon Gris, Gruner Veltliner, Syrah, Cab Franc, and Pinot Noir. So to get to experience that many varieties, again, I was still kind of sussing out exactly what varieties and what kind of regions I was leaning more towards. So I thought that would be a great kind of experience to see a lot of varieties in a country that, again, maybe I won't be able to come back to. So loved it. Again, Trudy Shield was the winemaker, lovely lady, classic Kiwi. She was a sheep farmer's daughter, so very kind of salt of the earth kind of lady, and told you straight kind of thing. And just great experience there. We had just a funny crew of people as well. We had a guy who is now the only ciderologist in the world. His name's Gabe Cook. He's got a wonderful mustache and a classic Shire accent from the UK. And yeah, just a fun crew to work with. And I was as well kind of in new equipment. So they had an RDV, which I don't know if you've heard of, is a rotary drum vacuum. So it's a big cylinder with a sieve on the outside of it, and you build perlite, which is like a diatomaceous earth medium to it. And then all the lees, after the juice is settled, would go through this machine. And so the lees would coat the white powdery perlite, and then a blade would shave off that layer, and the liquid juice would get sucked into the center of it, and all the solids would be shaved off. And so it would just slowly peel this cake that you had built for hours. And being naive and interested in a new piece of equipment, I was like, what's that? How does that work? And then I became the RDV operator for that harvest. So yeah, which is not bad. I mean, again, it's something else you kind of learn and want to master, and how to operate it efficiently. It was a brand new piece of equipment, so I don't know, it's kind of like, opening a new toy, I guess. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that was where I really learned like more of the details, because again, working with so much aromatic whites, gas cover on whites from the press and juice, clear rackings, everything was machine harvested, so it was kind of also an interesting experience to see a truck back up and 15 tons of Sauvignon Blanc just cascade into a hopper kind of thing, and that happened for 12 hours out of the day and everything. Yeah, so I worked from probably March till the end of May, and then my sister was getting married that summer, so I came back to the States for that. And again, trying to maximize my working holiday visa, I called back up Terra Sancta back in Otago before I left, and I was like, I'm gonna go work a harvest in Oregon, but once it's done, like, if you guys can figure out how to extend my visa past the 12 months, like, I'll be down as soon as I can, and then you keep me in as long as you want. Mm-hmm. And the winemaker was like, yep, sure, we can, he's like, he was making beer as well at the time, so he was like, I can write up a work visa that you are a vineyard brewer and winemaker, that I can't find a Kiwi that could do that kind of thing, and it'll be sweet. So I was like, okay, cool. So my goal was to kind of find a tight production or harvest job here back in Oregon that also provided housing, and that happened to be Elk Cove. So lived at the, as they call it, the shack on their Mount Richmond property. And yeah, housing was provided. We were done by Halloween, so I flew back to New Zealand like 1st of November and started back up down in New Zealand. I really enjoyed Elk Cove. It was a very different experience. The interns were more of the like cap management and additives, so it was kind of lab-like jobs, I guess. Whereas they have like their own crew that did like all the sorting and the morning punch downs. So we were more like the late shift. So, normally you're working like 7 to 7 or something like that. And there we started 10 and worked till like 9 at night. So, to get to sleep in and have like a casual morning for a harvest job, you're like, this is pretty clutch. Yeah. So enjoyed that, working with Heather and Adam. Again, like fun crew. There was an assistant winemaker from New Zealand who works for Tohu, and her partner came over as well, and he just loves bikes. He, like, when I moved into the house, there was a box with a bike in it, and it was like a 1993 bright pink, I know, it was some classic bike that he was just like wanted to buy, and so he rode this like old bike around Yamhill County while we were, harvesting and stuff like that, and trying beers and stuff. So it was, again, a fun crew to like hang out with in the evenings and work with. So.
And then you went back to New Zealand. Yep. At some point, I assume you're thinking about finding a place that's more settled, finding a more permanent position.
Yeah, it was starting to. Again, I figured after Terra Sancta, like that would be kind of the point that I'd look for something. And then it kind of worked out. So yeah, I worked through the summer from November till March again, same kind of jobs, a lot more setting up irrigation systems and repairing irrigation systems for them. And then moved into the cellar, and it was a fun experience because it was the winemaker, myself, and then we had a marketing person that also did the lab. And so everything was sorted in the vineyard. So 2 bins would come, and he would kind of just give me work orders in tanks, and then it was myself processing 250 tons. So it was just like I had 2 forklifts, so I would like load a destemmer, take the bin out of underneath the destemmer, load a tank, and then just be like swapping. So I was just riding 2 forklifts all day. And it was kind of, they made a rosé, which is still like the most interesting and like labor intensive rosés. So we would destem it, put it into like a 5-ton tank, we would do pump overs for 2 days while it was like cold, like 45 degrees. And then after the 2 days, we drained and dug it out as grapes, which I don't know if you've ever dug out grapes. It's not a fun experience. It's very itchy because of all the sugar. And then that would go into the press, and then we'd press it and then ferment it as like on the clear juice. So yeah, a nice, like, I think the color was probably more stable with that process, but I don't think I'd want to do that ever again. Yeah. It's very like juxtaposition how like making rosé at Elk Cove. So yeah, it was just kind of like, oh, there's many ways to do this for sure. But yeah, I think that as well, working for Terra Sancta, learning more about coopers and like why a winemaker would choose this cooper or that cooper, and like medium plus, or the aging of the staves, because the winemaker was very like particular about, I've got this block and I want, this cooper with it, or this amount of new oak and things like that. Where again, the larger facilities, we never really got into that. I never really myself got into that aspect of like picking out the barrels that he had told me to select and that aspect of it. So yeah, worked that harvest, and I had still been in contact with like the cellar master and the British guy, the cider maker, because he actually was still working there, and he was leaving, and the cellar master was leaving. So I called up Trudy and was like, I'm still in the country. If you can sort out a visa, I'll be there tomorrow. And she called me a week later and she's like, yeah, I think we can make that work. So hopped in my car and I drove back up to Nelson, and I started working full-time at Waimea Estates. So that was my first full-time job in the wine industry. So that would have been May of 2015.
And what was the initial role?
So cellar hand, yeah. So it was myself and the new cellar master, Phoebe, who's now the assistant winemaker at Mahi in Blenheim. So the two of us, assistant winemaker, and then Trudy. So yeah, and then just kind of jumping in where the cellar master and the other cellar hand had left off, with kind of getting Sauvignon Blancs finished up, ready for bottlings, and all the kind of yearly work of a winery, which again was kind of knew the idea of it, but had never really gone through the motions of it. So, topping barrels, finishing wines for bottling, blending, and that aspect of stuff.
What did you think about the non sort of harvest work, the slower season work in the cellar?
Actually, I honestly prefer it when in New Zealand, because of the ratio of like whites to reds, where like, with the volume and the way that like the amount of grapes that the Waimea produced, they actually didn't bottle themselves. So they were a bit of a custom crush facility. So, we'd be filling what we called goons, which are 23,000 liter bags in a container box. So you just, think of like a box wine, but the size of a container that you're just like filling, and you're like, well, it says 5,000 more liters should fit in there, but it's already like expanded as fully as you think it can, and then it still fits, another 5,000 liters. So like we would ship wines to Bulgaria that I don't even know, they were probably just called, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, or he had his own label, or maybe some of our wine went to like Salisbury in the UK and things like that. So there was constantly, wines to finish, different wines to either ship out as bulk wine, or we didn't bottle on site. We sent it to another winery and they bottled, which is an excellent model because you don't have to deal with any of that stuff. You just fill tankers and out it goes. So yeah, there's constant flow of things and jobs to be doing. We would blend up, gosh, how many tanks do we have? The whole winery, I think, was like 1 million liters. So we would do like 500,000 liter blends for like Pernod Ricard. So like, for a week straight, I would rack two 50,000 gallon tank or 50,000 liter tanks, clean them, and then set them up for the next day to rack another two, and just like boom, boom, boom down the line kind of thing. And Nelson, their winters are super mild. So you might see 2 frosts throughout the whole winter, and then like daytime temps are like 55 and just beautiful sun. So like you can't really complain about the environment at all. And yeah, I really found kind of a community there. So I found out that there was quite a big soccer league. So I joined, like a rec soccer league, and was playing 11-a-side throughout the winter, and then summer soccer of 6-a-side throughout the summer. And then I moved in with an English couple that were mountain bikers, and they're like, yeah, you should get a mountain bike. So I bought a mountain bike, and there's amazing trails like right at the edge of town. So I'd literally hop on my bike after work, ride across town and go up the hills and, spend the afternoon riding trails or playing soccer. And that's where I found there's like a kung fu school in Nelson. So tried that for about a year. And yeah, it was kind of a, playing soccer twice a week, kung fu, mountain biking. And I was just like, all right, I kind of need to drop something. And yeah, kung fu kind of, the school changed and like the teacher changed. And I was like, okay, this is kind of the thing that I'm not that passionate or enjoying anymore. So yeah.
Sounds like a pretty wild adventure.
Yeah, totally. And from working, I'd committed to 2 years at Waimea, and in that time I also got residency in New Zealand. So now I'm a permanent resident of New Zealand and can return when I want, if I want. And yeah, and the Waimea was owned by a family when I started, and let's see, second year I think. They were bought by KiwiSaver, which is like a company or like a country-sponsored retirement plan. And so the management firm of the retirement plan bought the company and 3 other wineries. So it's kind of like, okay, this is interesting. Like, what will this bring? So I stayed for that, and then we'd actually bought a second winery in the region. That was like a whole gravity flow facility that was just for dedicated for high-end Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So I was kind of looking to that to be kind of a next step, but that never really materialized. Also in the time, I met my wife working harvest. So she was one of the interns that we had that came through Waimea. So she had heard about it we had hired a cellar hand, guy from California, and he had created a flag football league in Nelson, and she played full contact women's football in the Czech Republic. And so she was looking to play something and joined this flag football league. And he was like, hey, if you're looking for work, because she was just living in a van doing the working holiday, she had picked cherries, worked on a hop farm, picked kiwi fruit. So she figured she was going to be picking grapes and showed up, and the winemaker was like, no, you're going to be working, in this environment. And she was like, okay. So that was kind of, her introduction to wine, and as well fell in love with the whole process and fell in love with me, of course. So, yeah. And then, so that was 18. 19 was when I kind of felt that I had learned what I could from Waimea and was looking for something else. And we were interested in, starting a family, and her being from the Czech Republic and me being from the States, as well as kind of the cost of living in New Zealand, that we're like, okay, I don't know if this will be it, the long-term place for us. So after the harvest of 19, or during it for New Zealand, we were looking for other jobs. She actually got a job first at Dobbs, as a cellar, like a harvest position. And then I had gotten a job at Jackson Family Wines at the McMinnville facility for a harvest enologist. And so that was because we looked literally anywhere. I was like, I'd be happy to go to Europe. So we had applied to places in Germany and France and things like that. And of course, language barrier is a bit hard. And the whole idea of starting a family, I was like, well, been in California, I'm not interested in going back at all. So if we're going to come back to the States, it's going to be Oregon. And so we got our jobs and flew back in June of 19. And then she started working, and I found out that there was a mix-up, and they had actually filled the position of the harvest enologist position at Jackson, because they had changed to assistant winemakers. And so he took the hiring over, and I don't know, through the whole process, didn't work out. So I was supposed to start, what I understood was in June, and they couldn't have me start until like August. So I was kind of just like, okay, well, I'll just keep searching for anything and everything, because I'm like, I need to be working. And I happened to see an ad on Facebook by Corey Morris, who's Willamette Valley Crossflow, and he's like looking for crossflow operators. And at Waimea, we had ran 3 different types of crossflows, so I was like, okay, like that'll be easy. So answered his ad, showed up, and he's like, can you drive a truck and trailer? And I was like, yeah. And showed me the crossflow, and he's like, all right, sweet, like, and sent me out on the road. And so, first job, he came with me and stuff like that. But after that, he was, I filtered wine for Shea, Britton, Bryn Mawr, what else? Rocco, yeah, just kind of did that for the month of June and early August, and then still had not really found anything permanent that I was looking for in Oregon. So, started the job at Jackson Family and was still looking, and ended up 2 weeks in getting a position for the production winemaker for Fela, Oregon. So 2 weeks at Jackson, and then I told them that I was going to take a permanent position for Fela, which, love those guys. They're totally understanding that, sorry, it didn't work out. It was confusion, and we understand and everything like that. Like the 2 weeks I worked there, we had like half-day Fridays and like a barbecue on Fridays. So, I mean, they know how to, have a relaxing like start of vintage and everything like that. So, would have been a great environment either way. But yeah, so started working down at the Zenith property for Fela, and yeah, thought that would be a great experience. It was, met pretty much only the assistant winemaker for interview process and like hiring and everything like that. And then she was just like, all right, well, we're gonna go start harvest down in Napa. So here you go. You've got 2 interns that we've already secured for you. And here, like, you guys will do all the vineyard samplings, and then, send us the numbers, and then we'll tell you the picks, and we'll organize all the picks. So they were just like, we'll tell you what day fruit's showing up and how much, and you guys process it, which I thought was kind of awesome, because it's pretty hands-off-ish. So, they kind of gave us the philosophy of the winemaking of like, they're very much, very terroir, vineyard specific, native yeast, no additives, which I thought was awesome. That's everything that I wanted to start working into. Yeah, so it was pretty much, you've got these tanks, fill them, and make good wine. It was basically the directive I had from them. So yeah, it was great. I enjoyed the whole experience. And then, yeah, finished harvest, finally met Aaron Jordan like halfway through, and we had so much fruit with 19, and also with like the rains and everything, the slowness of the processing, we were actually backed up because there was only the 3 of us. So he had 2 people come up from the Napa winery to come help us for a couple of weeks to get through, because like we had Chardonnay tank, but I had no time or people, because the 3 of us were processing Pinots, to like rack it and get it into barrels. So that was good to have them to like come up and just like bridge that gap for like a week. So what turned out to be like kind of a tiny winery, we had 5 people in for like a week, and yeah, fun little crew. But yeah, so I got to do all the things that I'd been kind of conceptualizing but never really put into practice. And that, places like Waimea being machine picked and sometimes not the greatest of seasons, there's some compromised fruit that we would never do, like native ferments or anything of that aspect, where like, you're like, I think this will all ferment without any intervention, but I've never like seen it. And that was the time that I actually got to see it. So yeah. And then worked there It was a very short stint. I thought it was a permanent position. It was actually until Thanksgiving. So, yeah, I don't think they had that in mind to be a full stint, but they didn't enlighten me to that. So, found myself with just signed papers for a house and then became unemployed. So, was lucky enough that I could cancel that and was looking for another job. So, got back with Corey doing cross-flowing through the winter, and I had worked for cross-flowing for Yamhill Valley Vineyards, and was talking to Ariel and being like, yeah, just kind of looking for, just here in the valley, we're looking for work, and also had a baby on the way. My wife and I found out she was pregnant in middle of harvest in 19 with our firstborn, so yeah, it was very imperative that I find some work. So I was talking to her, and she's like, yeah, I can hire you part-time for like a cellar master position, and you can help me with topping and wine movements and things like that. So I was like, cool. Any other work I can do. So I was doing cross-flowing and started to work with her. And then I actually started talking to Isabelle Munier about, because Peyton West was leaving, about helping her out. And so at one point, I was about ready to have 3 part-time jobs in, spring of 2020. And a friend of mine, Evan Strode, who's with RP, who manages our vineyards here, told me about that Résonance was hiring. And he's like, job description sounds very basic because it just said, cellar worker. But he's like, you're going to be in a facility and it's just going to be you, and you're going to basically be doing all the work. And I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds cool. So applied, interviewed with Guillaume, and yeah, it was interesting as well at the start of a job because we were kind of deep into COVID. So I was probably one of the few people that was hired in April of 2020 at all. Sheila, our controller, was working from home, and Guillaume was working from home. So I met him like the first day at a distance. And then he's like, all right, here's the winery. I'm going to go work from my home. Familiarize yourself with this, all of this. The wines are downstairs. They probably need to be topped. Here's our lab. Here's the equipment. Probably do some analysis to make sure everything's squared away. Let me know if you need to buy anything. And I was like, okay. So jumped into that. I think maybe like a month later, like the restrictions kind of got dropped. So like Guillaume came back to the winery and finally got to taste like the 19s in barrel, and super tight. I was like, wow, I don't know if this is a great fit. Like I wasn't sure about these wines. And then our process here is we'll rack the Pinots in spring. So we'll get them off the sediment after we sulfur and mallow's finished. So went through that process, and like we tasted again, and the wines just relaxed and opened up. And I was like, okay, like this will be really interesting to work here. Like I'm excited for this. So got to finish up the 19s and get those into bottle, and then yeah, was super stoked for 2020 up until was it September 9th or whatever, and you had blue sky, and then it was just purple and brown for as far as you could see, as well as trying to sort harvest crew and what's the distancing requirements like in a winery and all the things like that. So, and yeah, again, never seen tanks like these before, which are horizontals with a screen that we build in the front, and they have a motor with an internal screw that turns and mixes the fruit. So like, coming from New Zealand where everything is like super sanitized and everything like that, just staring at those and being like, my God, there's so many surfaces and so many nooks and crannies. Like, how am I going to keep that like sanitary and everything like that? And so a lot of hand scrubbing the first harvest with everybody to get those like spick and span. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, for us, never had experience with smoke, so we picked everything, processed like normal, and just kind of kept waiting. I know we both like, Guillaume and I were like looking at each other like, I hope we're not like, we have like no receptors for smoke, because I'm not picking up any smoke on any of the ferments. And then finally, like one of our last ferments from the Dundee Hills, we're finally like, oh, okay, there it is, there, okay. So it's not just us, like we can smell it, so we're at least thankful for that. But so I mean, all the way through, we had a few lots that, I guess we'll go back. It was a very technical harvest in the regard of like, you have a problem and you need to solve it with the smoke. Like, is there a solution? So instead of just, guiding the fruit into a wine, you're like, I need to be a winemaker and actually make these wines. So as like a first experience with this fruit, everything, you're really like, it's a lot more hands-on than our actual process, which is quite hands-off. So we are tasting a lot more, trying to identify like, can we like correct these faults from, again, mostly our Dundee Hills property, which is a lot closer to the smoke than we were here. So like we tried, did enzyme trials, did like every additive that we could find in a booklet that could possibly reduce or add body, or who knows what, what would be, is there a magic bullet out there? So it was kind of, in that regard, like a fun experience to go through that, can we fix this? Again, because of the vintage and everything, we declassified we didn't produce a single vineyard, and we decided to make a Willamette Valley. We thought the blend of everything would be a better representation than trying to, ask someone to buy a $75 bottle of wine that, again, an Oregonian would know of what happened. I think the greater market, they probably had no idea, because most people don't know about Oregon Pinot anyways, so sometimes, which is unfortunate, but yeah. So, we actually opened up a 2020 a couple weeks ago for just like a cork trial, and Guillaume and I were both just like, well, damn, that's not bad. So, still pleased with how it turned out. But yeah, just kind of, as well, like our Chardonnay, 18 was the first vintage that we produced Chardonnay from Decaver, so 2020, third vintage, so we were still kind of, Guillaume had brought over like his protocol of what he had learned from Jadot, but in terms of like what we were looking for, it's kind of a bit of an open book. So since then, we've kind of tweaked it here and there. We, just being kind of a bit of a wine nerd, like now we use only Lafleur products. And so I was looking through their catalog, and they had like this wine called CX9, which is like isolated from a Burgundy house. And, I was like, oh, that'd be interesting to trial. So we trialed it in 2020. We liked it. So then we trialed it on a different block in 21 and liked that more so than the previous yeast. And so then 22, we had used that for everything. And then started kind of incorporating more lees, shorter settling times. 22, we also tried a black maceration. So we'd like foot stomped the Chardonnay, loaded the press, left it overnight, and then pressed it the next morning to kind of see what that like oxidative style would do. A little heavy for us. I think the longer cold soak, we got a lot of pH shift, and so that kind of softened the wine more than what we would ideally like. So kind of not where we wanted to go. So, but it was fun to, again, you never know until you try it if that's your style of Chardonnay. Yeah, and so this last year we've started using native yeast for the Chardonnay as well, where from 21 we've been using native yeast on the Pinot Noirs. So now with the older vines of Chardonnay, we're kind of delving into that aspect. Again, all of our wines are terroir driven. So, Résonance fruits separated by block to see how the whole entire wine, that block ages from the fermentation to the barrels through to the end before we actually blend them. So everything's kept separately that we can kind of still learn from each of the blocks. And then using the native yeast on top of that to remove our influence as much as possible. And it's quite a at least the Pinot one's quite an active native yeast. We had one year that it pushed like almost the whole cap out of the tank. So like I came and there was like a mound of just skins on the ground, like about that, and it was just like frothing. It's like, okay, that's not stopping anytime soon, so which is good. You want a nice, clean, fast ferment, so yeah.
Like a volcano project.
Yeah.
Nice. I like that.
Very much alive.
So that's a very interesting time to start a new job, obviously. So 2020, lots of interesting challenges. I'm curious about, now you've been here for a few years, how has your work or your role expanded, and how has the process of sort of making this place yours or making yourself home here gone?
Yeah, I mean, when I started, we had 10 5-ton tanks like behind you and 7 of the horizontals, which were like only in the center, and the rest of the space was empty. We made 5,000 cases in 2020. Typical production, I think before that was like 12 and 19. Then we went to like 17, and now we produce 22,000 cases. And only in after harvest of 23 did we hire a cellar hand. So for 3 years, I made pretty much all the wines by myself, because Guillaume, he's the winemaker, but he's also kind of the face of the company and the GM. So like all of next week, he'll be out in the market. So 1 week out of every month, he's out in the market around, Canada or New York or LA or wherever. So it's very much, we collaborate on what needs to get done. And then at that point, I was executing it. Now I have been my cellar hand, so it's now the two of us executing it. We bought, another 10 5-ton tanks over 2 years, and the 7 10-ton horizontal tanks. So kind of sussing out, and as well these vertical tanks, sussing out where they would go, what's the logistics of that. We redesigned our sorting line as well as that. So we bought gravy boats to streamline our loading of tanks. Before, it was like a 1/4-ton bin that came from Jadot that was like, trying to lift in, that it would slide and then, make sure it didn't fall off the forks. Now that holds like 3/4 of a ton. So it's so much more streamlined process and efficient. So I know it's always fun to hear after, like, we've had interns, they're like, yeah, it's pretty chill here. I'm like, yeah, well, that's what I hope harvest is. Like, I don't want to be running around and everyone being like, this doesn't seem right, or, be a bit worried about like, what's the process, or like how are we gonna get through all this? It should feel easy. So that's my goal for, the flow of a winery, working in a winery, that should be as simple as possible. I don't want to work hard if I don't have to.
And now you're on the side of having interns. I'm curious about sort of selecting interns, and then sort of what you want to impart to them while they're here.
Yeah, I know I like to show them like every aspect I can. Like you always, when I was an intern, you talk to people that worked at large facilities, like, yeah, just clean tanks, or they got pigeonholed in some job somewhere. So, sorting is a huge part of how we make wine in Oregon, to have the cleanest fruits. So it's a very important job. I think interns sometimes are like, oh, I'm stuck on the sorting table. It kind of sucks. Like, I'm not winemaking. But, if you don't see the fruit and know what you don't want in a tank, then you'll never know how to make great wine. So I think that's a huge, during harvest, Guillaume is not much about logistics inside the cellar. He's on the sorting table. He's there every day, like all day long. He only comes off of it for like vineyard picks, things like that. Excuse me. So like in terms of, like, I collaborate with him. I'm like, all right, we've got, 8 tons of this block. I'm thinking this tank, and then if we have a little extra, we'll like make a small blend of like a few lots from that same area of the vineyard. And he might have a comment, or he might just be like, yep, sweet, go for it, kind of thing. So he's, it's great to work with him for that aspect, that he's very much like, you're part of this whole process. Like, yes, I'm the winemaker, but I'm not the winemaker kind of aspect. I don't know if that makes sense. So yeah, I really appreciate that kind of collaboration rather than like dictation to work as a working environment.
What comes next for you as you look ahead? What are some things you haven't done in wine yet that you want to do?
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, I'll get there one day, but like the whole process of like, the critical point of making a wine is when you choose to pick it. So that's something that I've yet to kind of like, I think that's almost the most critical position or decision in winemaking. And where does that wine go from there? So to be able to be that one that makes that decision, and then like, okay, like this is my image of where these grapes are going to end up. So I take it from, currently I pretty much take it from after that decision and collaborate with Guillaume through the rest of the process. But yeah, whether that's here and I don't plan on leaving, like this, we're still very much like a toddler, I think, in terms of like a winery and where this place will go. So I think there's a lot to build from here. But yeah, I think it'd be fun to have that stamp of to see that where a wine went with that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, having a cellar hand now, we just brought on a winemaking software, so it'd be a bit more record-based, where again, kind of working by myself, it was like a chat with Guillaume, and then it would just be kind of me doing it. So it's kind of no point in writing a work order for myself and like cataloging that. So it was very like casual in that aspect, which I enjoyed. So yeah.
And for the brand, as it moves forward, you mentioned still being kind of a toddler. Tell me about sort of ambition for Résonance.
Again, I think just to establish of like how Oregon makes incredible Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. I mean, all of our vineyards, besides the Résonance vineyard, are quite young. So like Kusa, we've purchased in 22, so 22 is our first vintage, so that's really like kind of like just finding its feet. So we're really interested to see, like, we opened the Chardonnay last night with the event, and it's probably, the favorite. Like, it's the best we've been involved in, so I'm really excited for that. And the Pinot is like, we're still kind of sussing out how we'll work that. I mean, it's good, but I think we just need to find like the right blend of fermenters and oak and everything like that. So yeah, but those kind of aspects are what keeps the job interesting. There's always something to tweak or learn, or I think the point where maybe it becomes formulaic would be where the point where I'd be like, okay, maybe I want to find something different. But yeah, I don't think I'm anywhere close to that as of yet. Yeah, as well, like, working in this space, I'm super lucky that it's very flexible. I've actually kept bees here for the last 4 years. So up the Résonance vineyard, I keep about 7 hives, and we sell the honey in the tasting room. And again, it's a great space. So, I extract honey here. I've made beer in the space. So it's pretty great to have, a lot of just capacity and flexibility with the facility to, allow me to do that.
No sourdough yet?
No, that's my wife's shtick. Yeah, I don't dabble in that. After our firstborn, when she was pregnant, she really got into watching the Great British Bake Off. So that kind of led her down that pathway. So after our son Oliver was born, she was making cakes and sourdough breads and selling them as out of like a cottage industry kind of thing. And then got back into the wine industry. She actually worked harvest with us in 21 here. And then was kind of like, okay, like, we both can't be in production. This is not going to work. So she got into pouring in the tasting room and being in front of house, and she, kind of climbed that ladder, and so from there she became director of hospitality at Saffron, and now she's at Northwest Wine Company working for them. So.
Talk about the Oregon industry a bit more generally. Tell me about your kind of initial impressions of Oregon wine, the people here, the wines they're making, and how you've seen that grow and change in the time you've been aware of it.
I mean, working at 12th and Maple, like I got to interact with a lot of winemakers and a lot of lovely people, like just very generous with their time and everything like that. I'm sure you guys have interviewed or met James Cahill, but he's just, the sweetest guy and just very again, generous with his time and everything like that. So very just open. I also think everyone's not afraid of failing or just going for it. Mm-hmm. So like I remember working at Elk Cove, and it was kind of for them early in their Chardonnay program, and they're like, let's put some stuff in barrels, let's put some stuff in tanks, let's ferment it cold, let's ferment it warm. It was kind of like, we're just going to throw kind of the noodle at the wall and see what sticks. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a flexibility that Oregon shines with. I mean, now we're seeing like, places like Abbey Road Farms, and they just, they have so many varieties that, half of them I haven't heard of, and, curious to see where they go. You see a lot of like Trousseau and things like that popping up. I remember I went to a tasting early on, my wife and I, and they wanted to do anything from Oregon that's not Pinot. And I ended up finding a Nebbiolo from Cameron, and you're just like, wow, like it was delicious, but totally random. Mm-hmm. So I think, within the core of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay that Oregon has, there's always like those tiny gems that people are kind of just polishing there in the corner by themselves. Yeah, and just kind of exploring and seeing what else they can do and trying just, new things. So we're not limited in any capacity.
Right. Last question for you. What's been your greatest achievement or proudest accomplishment so far?
Oof. Like in terms of wine or just life or whatever?
However you want to take it.
Okay. I guess we'll split it up. For wine, probably the 21 Willamette Valley with getting in the top 9. That was pretty special to, just trying to make the best wine you can, and then for it to be recognized as such is pretty great. Like you're not expecting that, but it's a nice honor to be a part of that. And then probably like in life, having 2 kids and just going through that whole experience. I don't know if you have kids, but it's it's nothing I ever thought it would be, or it's pretty neat experience to go through. So maybe a journey on. It's never over, so.
Just like wine.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, like it's kind of it's. I think that's why wine's also neat. It's like a living history. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Excellent. All the questions that I have for you. Anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't talk about today?
No, I think that's pretty. Wraps it up.
Excellent. Thank you so much for taking
Absolutely.
the time to share your story with us, sharing this space with us. We appreciate it. We'll go ahead and let you off the hook.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.